Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and we're here at Cranberry Lake Preserve, Westchester County-owned facility in the town of North Castle, just a little north of downtown White Plains. And we're here not only to spend time with the ecology camp that's based here, but we're going to give them a task in a few minutes to vote to select for the name for our new ride at Playland that we hope to open certainly within the next 2 weeks, hopefully sooner than that. We decided to do this, and our Director of Communications, Catherine Chaffee, suggested it because we wanted to involve young folks in this new ride. We haven't had a new ride at Playland in 11 years, and we thought that if we got some of the kids involved, that would create a little more interest. And we did get interest. We had over 400 names suggested by people in the public for the name of the new ride, and we had a tough time distilling it down to 5. But what we have here today will be an opportunity for the campers to vote on each of the names, and depending on how it turns out, we'll have a new name selected by those who are here for the camp. I'm joined by our Commissioner of Parks, Recreation, and Conservation, Kathleen O'Connor, and our Deputy Commissioner, Peter Tartaglia. And we've had a number of events over the course of the last few weeks at many of the various parks in Westchester County. We have over 50 facilities countywide. We have pools, we have golf courses, we have beaches, we have an amusement park, we have 6 of these nature centers. We have places like Ward Pound Ridge where you can go hiking, and we have places like Wilson Woods and Tibbetts Brook in urban settings in our bigger cities. So it's a real diverse amount of real estate that has been set aside, and I don't take any personal credit for that. The creation of this park system was created by my predecessors, stretching out over 50, 75, almost 100 years, and their wisdom in creating these parks, seeing opportunities, is really why we're here today, and tying in both the immediate story of what this preserve represents, and then with the tie into Playland. So basically, we've got so many different submissions. We had a few like Ridey McRide. Somebody wanted to call it I-95. I-95 is its right unto itself. I know it very well. But we narrowed them down to 5 different choices, and I assume we have members of our communications team able to show you these different choices. From Mike Barneau, we had Dizzy Dragon. Hold up, Dizzy Dragon. Who's got Dizzy Dragon? Hold it up. We got it? Okay. That's Emily Lavin. Next, we have Dragon Spinner, offered by Robert Villanueva. All these have a dragon connection. I wonder why. The next suggestion came from Joshua Rios, Dragon Twist. And we have 2 that came from the same individual, Larry Gottlieb of Mount Pleasant, the Dragonator and the Dragon's Tailspin. And all of those signs are there for you to see as they go with our new motto, not motto, what do we call them? What would we call coaster? Our mascot, thank you.
Yes.
Our mascot coaster.
Coast of the Dragon.
If it's not written in the script, George doesn't know what he's talking about. But in any event, what we're going to ask these young people to do in a second is to come up and look at the 5 names and then stand behind the name that you pick for the ride. And remember, this is the final answer, as they say in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We don't get to have a do-over here. If we do have a tie for first place, the two that are tied, we will re-vote. We'll take the other 3 out of competition, and anybody who voted for the other 3 will then resurface themselves between the remaining 2. And then if we get a tie after that, I don't know, we'll ask the press to pick up. We have 4 members of the press, and if we have a tie after that, I'll just go ahead and pick them because, I am the county executive.
Yes, that's
Anyway,
right.
but in all seriousness, so you're looking at these names. Let me read the names again. You see them up there, young folk, before you get ready to vote. Dizzy Dragon, Dragon Spinner, Dragon Twist, Dragonator, and Dragon Tailspin. Okay? So as you think about it, when you're ready to vote, come on up and stand behind the name of the poster board of the name that you think the new ride at Playland should be. Ready? Let's vote.
Ready? Dragonator, Dragon Spinner, Dragon Twist, Tailspin, Dizzy Dragon.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Oh boy, it's the Dragonator.
I knew that was going to happen.
No tie here.
That's what.
Okay, our official vote counter, Catherine Chaffee. What do we have?
Dragonator.
Yay!
The Dragonator.
Awesome.
Now, they may have had the most number of votes, but did they win the Electoral College? That's what we want. Okay, well, thank you, voters. That's the name of our new ride, the Dragonator.
Dragonator.
And sometime in the next 2 weeks or less, we'll open it up. Now, how many of you know what the ride does? You don't have no idea what the ride. Here's what the ride does. You're sitting on a disc. There's 24 seats, and you're facing out like you're on a motorcycle, right? And the disc circles around. It spins around at 360 degrees. And it sits on a half pipe. So it goes on a half pipe like this and back and forth as it spins 360 degrees.
Oh boy.
So come on down and see what you picked in Dragonator. And we encourage you to ride it, and we encourage you to enjoy it. So thank you very much, voters. At the risk of creating some of the best outtakes you'll have all year, let me open it up for questions. Well, first of all, before I do that, let me ask Kathy O'Connor and Pete Tartaglia to say a few words.
Thank you very much, County Executive George Latimer. He always says that he didn't invent the park system, but we have to say collectively, he and his administration have been so supportive of all that he can do for us, and we love working with him. This is an exciting day. As Mr. Latimer mentioned, it's been 11 years since there was anything new at our wonderful Playland Park. So this is a big day to have a new ride coming in, and I think it's a fabulous idea, Catherine Chaffee, for bringing in children, because that's who really makes up a big part of who comes to Playland. So the fact that they can now go to Playland and say, hey, we named that ride, that's really awesome. So congratulations to everybody. Thank you, and thank you for coming. And a shout out to Danielle Chiato, who is our curator here. She does a wonderful job. She is a one-man, one-woman show here. And like all our nature centers, they're really super self-sufficient, and they serve a lot of people, and we thank you for doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Pete?
Dragonator. It's cool. Thank you for voting. All the kids here today. Thanks for coming to our camps. Thanks for voting. Playland and our parks are about you, your parents, your friends, your guardians, your grandparents. All of our parks are about everything for families and everybody from age 0 all the way to 100. So thank you for being part of this. We're very excited about this ride. 11 years. Come on down to Playland. We thank the county executive and his office and the Board of Legislators for supporting Playland the way that they've been supporting us over the last few years. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. So let me open it up to questions. Any questions from our friends in the press? Tony.
I think it's fair to say that while the park might not have opened under some anxiety, there was definitely concern about how the season was going to go. The season appears to be going gangbusters. Got the numbers. Attendance is up about 8% year to date. You're on track to have one of your best years in many, many years. What do you think is behind that?
Well, I think the first thing is that we've shown a commitment, I think, from the top of the organization down to the people who are there working the park every day, that we're committed to the park. There have been different theories in the county government, outside the county government, about whether the county could properly manage Playland. And there's a school of thought that says, no, you should turn it over to the private sector and so forth. Now, there's a debate that will happen in a court of law. But in the practical world, we've stood behind the belief that we could run the park well. It could meet all standards, and it could project a good experience. And I've seen that in the enthusiasm of the employees, the way they've maintained the park, the way they've greeted people. It's never perfect, and we always have a lot of seasonal employees at a place like Playland, and there's always an employee education process that has to go on in that regard. But given the fact that we didn't have a big infusion of marketing money this year, because the budget that we put together last year, we've talked about budgets in other contexts, had a limited amount of money available. So we've tried to do the most that we could with what we've had. Arts on the Boardwalk, additional musical performances, the town days to try to attract people to come in on that basis. And of course, this new ride, and this new ride is not, the signature ride that everybody's going to come from all over the East Coast for, but it shows a commitment. And I think, Tony, that's what people are experiencing, that we're serious about making it a good experience. And if we can do significantly better in 19 than 18 or even 17, perhaps even 16, then the line starts to move upward. And as we go into next year, we're going to have, we'll talk about this at another time, additional capital projects going down over and above the ones that we've committed to. You've seen in just recent days, we've completed getting the approvals to fully renovate the Carousel and the Derby Racer, which are two traditional rides that people have a great connection to. So I'm hopeful that we're heading in the right direction. And I think, as Kathy said, it's not that we're Playland centric. We're very happy about what's happening at Sprain Ridge Pools. We have the activity pool open, thank God, after last week. We expect the larger pool to open very soon, and when that does, that's a commitment on that location. The Miller House, which is a different kind of recreational facility, it's an historic site. It's on track to be renovated. You've seen that. I don't need to repeat it as I usually do. But so I think it's a general commitment to those things, and then you can expand that to include other things that we've talked about as recently as Monday. So hopefully we're on the right path, but we've got to work it every day. There's nothing guaranteed, and we have been fortunate with weather. There are years that we've had bad weather, and weather affects this, this park as well. Weather affects our golf courses. Weather affects beaches, and when we've had years of bad weather, we've had low attendance. So we've had relatively good weather. We benefited from that.
My house is from 1926, and I know how expensive it is to maintain it and do anything there. It seems even more so with a park from 1920s as well. When you look at the costs associated with the Derby Racer, with the Carousel, and it's big bucks. What's the thinking behind justifying that spending?
Well, I think the key thing is that had we done things 10 years ago, and even before that, but primarily over the last 10 years, if we had done things little at a time, we wouldn't be looking at these kind of numbers. As a homeowner, if you get a brown spot in your ceiling, and you look at it and you say, we can't address it today, maybe we'll address it within the year, that's it. That's not an unreasonable delay. But if you go 10 years without addressing it, then the price tag of fixing it is huge. And that's why you're seeing such a huge price tag now. You're seeing things that, in my judgment, could have been addressed at a smaller amount and in smaller increments over the last period of time. So we view this as a catch-up period of time. We've got to catch up to where we should have been. Once we get to a more stabilized situation, then we'll be in a much more reasonable amount of capital year over year, the kind of things that maintain and improve at a decent level. And the final point to mention is, we were fortunate to have a certain amount of money for marketing, but the more we market the park, the more we drive visitors in the door. This park in years past did as well as 800,000 visitors. We're not going to hit that this year. We're just going to move up from low points of the year. But as we get more revenue coming in the door, it makes the cost of these things a lot less expensive to the taxpayers. Final point, tying in something we talked about in terms of our bond rating, you see now that we're heading in the right direction on our bond rating. What that means is the cost of capital, the interest on the capital, is going to be a little less than it would have been. If we can continue to make strides in our bond rating, then it won't be as expensive to do these projects in the future. Jonathan? Well, they're in certain ways two different tracks, because the debate that's now in court, and of course I'm constrained from talking about that in any great detail, really revolves around a contractual situation and how that was met or not met. But there's an underlying philosophy that was held previously, and not just by the prior administration, but by people in the community, that said that this shouldn't be run by a government. And that's part of a broader philosophy. There are people who want to contract out the running of a jail. They want to contract out everything because they think that the private sector will take on an obligation so that the taxpayers don't. I spent 20 years in corporate life. I worked for major corporation subsidiaries, Nestle, ITT. I've been involved in a host of projects with companies like IBM and what was then Shearson Lehman. Corporations don't take on somebody else's problems for free. They get involved in an operation if they see profit to be made. And what often happens is when you bring a corporation in and there isn't an intrinsic way to make profit, they'll take it off your hands, but they'll be the winner in the transaction. They'll get whatever benefit there is, and if there's any loss, you'll still be obliged to have that. So our thinking is, in terms of these parks, there is a public reason for for public parks. If everybody was as wealthy as some of our residents are, you wouldn't need a nature preserve because you'd live on a 50-acre estate. And there are people in this county that do live on 50-acre estates. And as great as Danielle is, they don't need a curator because it's their own property. But for most of the rest of us, you come to Cranberry Lake, you come to Reed Sanctuary, you come to Lenoir, you come to marshlands because you're coming to see something that you can't normally access. And part of it is the enjoyment for those of us as people of a certain age, but for those young kids, they're learning about the natural environment. And if you want a more sensitive environmental adult, then you expose them to nature at a young age. And this is part of why we have this here. It's part education, it's part recreation. And as is the third word in our department, it's parks, it's recreation, it's conservation. It's conserving these resources. You could, in theory, at some point in time, have taken land like this and said, you know what, let's take these trees down and let's build another 20 houses or whatever the zoning board would allow for. That's what almost happened at the Marshlands J area. And what would that do to the ecology of the environment we're in? So we think, and this is a matter of philosophy, but we think that what we're doing is measured and reasonable. We could, with 60 acres of open land, cut a deal with a developer to develop a biotechnical facility, which we think would be economically prudent. At another place where we have so many other acres of parkland, we can protect that parkland, and that can be an asset, and you can do both. And that's how we see this, as something of a balancing act between a variety of needs that the county has. Any other questions? I appreciate your time. You're welcome to interview any of the campers. Guys, you ready to go on TV and become famous? If you want to be interviewed, raise your hand, and we'll send the press your